Welcome, friends, to Head to Toe Spine and Sport Therapy, a modern manual therapy practice where movement is the best medicine. And in fact, that is the name of the show. Welcome to the Movement is the Best Medicine show. Now let's get into it. Hey, everybody. Welcome, guys. What's going on? And happy day. How's everybody doing?
Doing well.
Awesome.
Doing real good.
Oh, man. You guys look awesome. If you could be here in the room with us, beloved listener, you would see some good-looking people in this room.
That's right.
Yeah. Today we're talking about a very important topic, sport specialization. We see a ton of youth injuries in the clinic, and this is something that's really changed. I mean, I know that when I grew up as a child of the 70s, a love child of the 70s, and growing up in the 80s, there was no such thing as sports specialization. It was just like, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Whenever you wanted to do it, kind of. I don't even know if sports were really organized in the 80s, per se.
Well, sure wasn't for me. And I've got a few more years on you, Barry. I hate to admit it. But, it was not happening when I was in school. But we played everything. And it was just pretty fun.
It was all seasonal, right? You'd play whatever was in season. You weren't being groomed necessarily from birth to be a specific superstar player.
Right. You weren't going to be made into that John Elway at 6 years old or 7 years old. You were more were a kid and you got to play whatever you wanted to play.
Do what you wanted to do. Actually have fun with it.
Right.
Yeah.
But it shifted somewhere. And you guys, Lee and Tim, you guys kind of saw along the way, you kind of got a little bit of tell of this, right, when you were going through sports?
Yeah, Tim and I were talking about this, and it's like, for us, it really started off like very similar to what you were just talking about, whereas whatever the season was, that's what you played. Like, it's T-ball season in the spring. You go out and you play T-ball with your friends, or it's the summer, there's no sports going on at all, or maybe there's soccer.
Yeah.
Then the fall, it gets closer to football, you get into basketball and stuff, so... Yeah, basketball is not really a sport for me. I'm a little vertically challenged, but other kids, that's probably what they were doing. I'd say more so around like middle school is when we really started to notice like kids morphing to go for that sport that they were best at, whether it was like the soccer kids in the summer or it was in the baseball kids in the spring, and then they started to transition. Half of them would only play just that sport because it was the one they were best at, and they wanted to put all their eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to go about it.
No, not necessarily.
I guess I wonder, who made the decision initially that kids should specialize in sports and then train for that sport.
Yeah.
And so now we have this emergence of gyms that are training kids just for that one sport.
Yeah.
We have year-round sports. And I know that we're in clinic, we're seeing just a massive ramp up in youth injuries.
Yeah.
I mean, we see a lot of kids for really pretty intense overuse injuries.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to think when kids are younger, especially now that we're talking about, like this specialization in certain sports, especially from a younger age, and they're playing the same sport all the way through these years. At a younger age, a lot of times, and I'm not saying that the parents are all to blame. Not at all. That's not what I'm trying to say. But at the same time, when kids are younger, they're not fully making like their own decisions about things all the time, especially when you're starting a kid. Like Lee and I were just talking earlier, we both have wrestling backgrounds, and you see kids that are starting in wrestling at like 3 years old, like as soon as they can start walking. And I don't know. It just seems like there's something wrong there.
I think I wonder if, I think everyone's best intentions are at play. Like,
of course.
The parents want to give their child every opportunity to be the best at their sport. Mm-hmm. So whether the child is choosing that sport or the parents choosing that sport, or it's the sport that maybe the child is showing the best inclination for.
Yeah, of course.
And so they decide they're going to pour everything into it because we want to do our best for our kids. I mean, that's our number one, right? But somewhere along the line, someone decided that this was a good idea for them to become better athletes by specializing. And where, where it's really, we were talking about this today because, I was listening to NPR on the way here. And they were talking about sports specialization. And there's really, the research actually indicates that athletes who have specialized their whole lives are not better off than athletes who have played multiple sports.
Right. Yeah. And I think more the discrepancy comes down to, and the more that we talk about, the more I'm thinking about it is, as I was growing up, and Tim and I were both the same age, we always heard about like that 10,000 hour rule. Like you have to hit that 10,000 hours before you're an expert. So everybody just decided like the earlier that you start with that 10,000 hours, the sooner you're going to get it, the sooner you'll be an expert. So in our society, American society, like if you're an expert at your sport at 18 years old, you're going to get a college scholarship. And that's obviously that's the big motivator for people. That's the big trophy that everybody wants to put up on the wall is that diploma. You went to Harvard, you played football there, you played basketball there.
Huge.
And that's awesome, like when you attain that. But like you said, it doesn't necessarily mean like the earlier you train, the more likely you are to get that. So I think it's more a discrepancy with people like having their goal and they know what they want, but they don't necessarily have the correct path to go down.
Part of this is the Tiger Woods phenomenon. It really is.
Totally.
It's the Tiger Woods story as a parent that is rattling around in the back of your brain, where Tiger's dad is taking him out when he's 5 years old into the garage and helping him build his stroke, and it's what they do every day, every night. It's all they talk about. It's all they do, and he goes on to become one of the greatest golf legends of all time. And then we think, okay, well, that must be the path forward. Is the Tiger Woods path?
Yeah, I think that's a really true thing. I mean, in fact, that was mentioned on the story I heard this morning. But then the other interesting thing is like talking about professional basketball, right? The injury outage on those players is high because they're coming in already with too much wear and tear on their bodies.
Yeah.
So much.
Well, within the past 2-3 years, you've seen like major stress fractures turn into bones legitimately like blowing up on television.
You see it all the time.
You see, I think it was the Louisville point guard 2 or 3 years ago jumped up for a shot, landed, and his leg snapped in half because he just had an overuse injury that he'd just been playing through. I mean, we get it. It's a championship game. Like, he wants to be in the tournament and whatnot, but it goes to show you all the stress that he accumulated. He's only like 20 years old, if that.
That playing through it mentality, what you just said right there, that's a huge piece of it too, is like that mentality in terms of sports, even from a young age, is like, I know from wrestling, it's like one of the sayings was pain is weakness leaving the body. Like literally said in the room, all that's a t-shirts that said that. So I mean, like, you see this stuff, and that's not, I mean, that's just the sport that I know the best, so that's why I said it, but you see it all across every sport. I mean, like, just that push to, like, push through pain, or like at least like, suck it up and like push harder. And a lot of times, like we're seeing now, that culminates in injuries further down the road.
Explosive injuries, too. They're not even like small ones. Like an ankle sprain is really minor, and that could be like the first indicator that there's overuse. But if you have like a bone that's breaking, that's because there's a lot of stress that's just come to a point.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the number of athletes we've had this year where we've taken a look at that bone, you know, via MRI on a track. I have a number of track athletes in mind who have had those really intense shin splint episodes, and
15-year-old kids coming in with
and
broken tibias,
younger, right? And you get an MRI done, they've got a stress reaction in the bone, right? And that's a lot for a young kid to have.
So part of the question that we're trying to answer, or that we're exploring today, is sports specialization a good idea? And we're kind of landing in the camp that we don't really think from a result standpoint. Like, if you're trying to just, hey, I want to just give my kid the best possible opportunity and option to get the scholarship, to even if we're not thinking they're going to be NFL or NBA or PGA pros or whatever, we're thinking we want to get them the scholarship. We want them to perform well. We want them to be a top-notch athlete and get all the accolades and all the greatness that comes from that. Is sports specialization the best idea to get them there? That's part of what we're trying to answer today. And I think then the second part that we can get into is, well, what are things you can do if they are kind of specialized to prevent these types of injuries from happening? But to that first topic, is it a good idea? Kind of a mixed bag is what we're saying.
I think realistically in this office, I think it's a resounding no.
I think it's a resounding no.
You might get different opinions outside of the office, but I don't. From the experience that I've seen as an athletic trainer and as somebody who works at a sports chiropractor's office, you see a lot of injuries that are avoidable. From just point blank, like, they're avoidable. They don't need to happen. And the only reason why they do is because there's just too much load.
Overuse.
Yeah.
So. No, I totally agree with that.
I think there's just better ways. You can still work on your craft without doing the exact thing that you're doing, right? So,
no, I think that's a huge piece of it, too, because actually playing other sports, there's a lot of other skills that you gain from playing those other sports that can translate into the sport that you're playing. I mean, 100%. You see that all the time. So, I mean, yeah, I think playing the different sports and in the different seasons and everything like that gives you a more versatile skill background to apply towards, possibly the sport that you like the best.
It's not even just physical development; it's mental development too. That's psychological development.
Neurological.
If you have like wrestling, that's you're one-on-one. You're what everybody else does around you doesn't really affect like your decision making. You lose, that's on you. So there's nobody else to really rely on. Then there's a team sport atmosphere where you kind of have to work as a team. You have to learn how to work well with others, and I think that is the most important thing for kids. Especially the ones below the ages of like 13. It's more that socialization that's important at that aspect of like that turning point in life, and those kids can get turned off from like having social interactions just because like if they're specialized and they're not doing well at that specialized sport or whatever it is. So I think like specialization can oftentimes lead to greater issues than just physical stuff. Like if there's not physical stuff, there could be mental things that are going wrong. So realistically, you want the kids to pick what they want and what they can excel at, even if they're not good at it.
That is a great point. Yeah.
It's funny. Earlier we were talking before we turned the record button on, and Tim, you were talking about burnout that can happen with specialization. Yeah. And I was watching, I don't know if you guys are familiar with HBO. There's a great show called Divorce on there. It's really funny. You guys probably wouldn't actually find it funny because you've never been married or divorced. But being that I've been both married and divorced and remarried, and I have kids and I have co-parenting, it's hilarious, right? So I love it. But anyways, here's the point of this whole story. The point of the story is they have this teenager, right? This divorced couple has this teenager, and it's college time, and they put all this time and energy and years and years and years getting him ready for his college, his prep, his blah, blah, all this stuff, right? And then, of course, at the last minute, he's like, forget college. I'm not going to college. College is a joke. It's a sham. Right. And all this effort that they put into it, all these years, all the tutors, all this stuff, it like blows up in their face. Right. Because he got turned off from it because it was the mom's obsession that he goes to this one school to the point where he was like, I don't even want this anymore, and I'm not going to do it, and you can't make me. So there was that. It
probably
element.
wasn't even his obsession.
No, it wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't. And so then when he became his own person, he really didn't have that choice, and he chose that he didn't want to do anything that they wanted.
Yeah. Oh, parenting is rough.
It's rough.
It's rough.
It's very rough.
And that'll happen. I think one of the biggest things, for my two boys, of course, I'm a chiropractor, right? So they have learned to tell me when something hurts. But I think for all parents listening, really kind of helping your kids understand that pain is really a real thing, and then it's not okay because they think and a lot of them just they're rebuilding their collagen cells a million miles a minute, and they heal and they're fine. But I think just educating them on the process and how to look after their bodies a little bit is so preventative.
Well, I think it's great to be tough, but it's also equally important to be smart.
I love that. That's a T-shirt.
That's a good quote.
But I mean,
there.
It's great to be tough. It's great to be able to in certain situations, maybe you push through a little bit of stuff. Like it's a playoff game, it's a championship game, it's the state finals. Right. Okay, I get that. Like that's going to happen. But at the same time, when you're training, and like you were saying, you have pain. You have to be smart enough to realize, okay, like something's not right. Like let's figure this out.
And I think from a parenting standpoint, when you think about your kids and you think about these what in your mind maybe is minor aches and pains, it's easier to write it off and to think, whatever, they're going to heal, they'll be fine, they have their youth on their side, so to speak.
They still bounce.
Yeah. Whereas I think when you're an adult, you take your pain a little bit more seriously, although we know that adults, as we've talked about in the past, sometimes can delay their pain for a long time as well. It's really this whole idea of when there is pain, there is some kind of a situation going on, especially when it's chronic. So if we're going to say basically that, hey, listen, sports specialization ultimately is not probably the best path forward. There's a lot of risk with it, and the upside is relatively small. Especially when you look at the data, it doesn't even pan out. So what are our suggestions? I mean, what would you guys suggest that people do? One, if they are in a sports specialization situation, and how can they diversify? What are some good options? What are some good things to think about, conversations to have? And then two, if they're kind of locked into a specialization mode, what can they be doing to prevent some of these potential issues from coming up that we've outlined?
So the biggest issue with the specialization is the repetitive patterning, the same movements over and over and over and over and over. Like if you do a bicep curl 30 times every day, you're going to get a big bicep, but eventually that bicep's going to get so strong that it turns off other structures like your tricep and your back muscles. So essentially that's what goes on when kids specialize, especially at an early age. Like if you're only kicking the ball, you're only used to kicking the ball, your lower body is going to get a lot of stimulation, but your upper body is not necessarily going to be in the fold there. So like cross-training, like legitimate cross-training where somebody goes from like a lower body heavy sport to an upper body heavy sport would be something that you'd not necessarily want to promote, but like you want to like show that that's like a good choice. Like whether somebody wants to go from like throwing the ball to like kicking a ball or rowing to like doing fencing or something like that. It really just depends on what the kid wants to do. It has nothing to do with whether it lines up with what you want. It should be entirely on, does the child like to do that? Do they like that stimulation? Because if they like it, it's because their body likes it. It's not necessarily like they've never done that activity before. It's the body likes the stimulation. So that's what we really want to promote.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
I think another big piece of it is rest, obviously.
Well,
because we're talking about, like, let's say, like you're saying, let's say somebody is in that sports specialization type mentality. the kid is in it, the parents are in it, they know that they're going to be continuing on with it. We know they're going to be continuing on with it. I think, one big point to hit off the bat is rest. Like, you need to make sure that you're taking time to rest and actually like be able to recover, which is tough sometimes. We were talking about a little bit before that we have a lot of baseball players in right now because baseball turns out to be like not a full year-round sport, but pretty darn close. Yeah. Because of summer ball, school, like all the different leagues that they're in. Like, so you have kids that are in this all the time and they're practicing all the time because they want to get better. But I think a lot of times when you get so wrapped up in that, you don't realize that actually to improve even more, you need to rest. Like you need to allow your body to recover so that you're able to perform at a higher level the next time that you go back after it.
Yeah. So. And of course, I would say the final thing is your soft tissue reset. Learning to use a lacrosse ball properly, foam roller. Yep.
That's
combining
huge
that
too.
Piece in. It's just huge self-care piece.
Yeah. Also just knowing the difference of pain. Like an aching pain is completely different than a sharp pain versus like a throbby pain versus like a tingling or a sharp shooting sensation.
And that's important to know, like to realize those, and then when that's a good time to like come see somebody like us.
Yeah, that's a whole topic in itself, pain. Yeah. I love that you brought that up.
That's a great topic.
Yeah, podcast number 2 there. Yeah. But because that is such an important point, knowing a little bit about what pain means.
And kids don't have any experience with that, so they just watch what you do. Like if you say, I have a sharp pain, and you continue working, they're going to think, I have to continue working with that sharp pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than like, I have this sharp pain, I'm going to go take my lacrosse ball and address it, and now go back to my activity. Yeah. So it's like the parents, the way that they deal with their pain is also important when you're talking about the child and how they're going to deal with theirs.
Yeah.
I think every time I see a young athlete injured, and or we're helping them through their sport of choice, I always just try to think about what they're going to be like when they're my age. Right? I feel like that's our responsibility as clinicians, is that at 51, I'll admit it, they have to feel pretty great still, right? And if we don't look after them and teach them right now what to do and how to help their bodies, how to pay attention, then they're going to be dealing with a lot of injury by the time they're my age.
I think that's a huge point to where we come in on that too, because I've talked with a lot of people in terms of like, the work that we do here, kind of as like sports chiropractors, and that when I was, because I didn't go to anybody like a sports chiro, physical therapist, anything like that when I was going through like sports through high school, middle school, or anything like that. And I think back to like when I was going through that and how much I would have appreciated like having somebody like myself now, or like anybody here to treat me going through that would have been huge, not only from a performance standpoint, but just like we were talking about before, from like an injury prevention standpoint.
You became the person who you wanted all this time in your life.
Yeah.
I think in a sense,
in a way, yeah. I mean,
when I was a solo provider, I would have done anything to go see myself. I mean, I hate to self-plug, but it's true.
No, yeah,
right?
But it's
we
true.
are such a unique clinic, and we're so talented in manual therapies and in chiropractic, and then in that corrective exercise and rehab piece, bringing it all together. Like, self-plug for head to toe. I mean, you guys are amazing. What a great team. Now I don't have to go anywhere else to get it fixed. It's lovely.
We do have a great team. Yeah.
I mean, just going off what Tim just said, I mean, I was the opposite. I've been going to a chiropractor since I was 9, and that was just because of sports. My dad has always worked in a factory. He was always a blue-collar worker, so he'd just bring me with him, and then eventually once I started playing football and wrestling more often, needed those tune-ups like every other week or so.
Yeah.
And I think that I can't say like right off the bat if that kept me out of having any major injuries, but I've never had a major injury, so
that's
hey,
awesome.
I mean,
that's a great point, because I had some significant injuries going through, and I didn't have that care.
Right. Never had anything more than like a minor ankle sprain that keeps you off for like a week,
and that's
maybe.
Awesome.
If that.
That's great. Yeah.
Well, in that case, and I think to hone in on that example, maybe we would say this is a positive example as a youth athlete. You had ongoing preventative care, treatment, soft tissue reset, etc.
And just different sports.
In different sports.
Yeah.
And your dad was into it though too. He went to get preventative care and treatments done.
He went to chiropractic for 10 years before I even went. So.
See, I think we do with our children what we know.
Right.
And since oftentimes we're not given a guide to the body, right? We don't have the instruction manual. Right. So many of us grow up without ongoing treatment or care of this particular type, or we've had some kind of experience over time that we have a preconception about what maybe the treatment is or isn't, or what it can or can't help with. So we don't even realize the option exists. That's what I see a lot of times.
Yeah.
And people I talk to, and even when in my own life, and I look at my own history, I just didn't even know that this kind of treatment existed to help.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have came a lot earlier. But in that case, your dad knew, right? And he brought you with, and you benefited from
Yeah,
that.
it was like I had some low back pain as a 10-year-old kid who got got tackled in football. So it was nothing like crazy out of the ordinary. And he was just like, "Oh, I have low back pain too. Let's go get the same treatment." And it worked.
Yeah, I did too.
Awesome.
I got treated for headaches when I was 9 or 10 years old because of my dad as well.
Yeah.
So I think I do think I think a lot of times I have parents ask me about their kids, because they think, well, do you treat kids? Like, would this be applicable to them? And it is a
and off that, it's not the same.
It's not the same, and that's what I often say. It is different with kids, and I think a lot of people think that it's. Or they think about chiropractic. Maybe they don't understand our office, and they just don't know if it would be right for their kids' bodies, or they're concerned, or
Right. Because some people need really intense work, other people don't.
Right.
I'd say most kids don't need
intense work.
Most
kids don't.
Yeah.
They need a little bit, and it helps them a ton.
But the little bit helps a lot.
So much.
And I think oftentimes then they need a system or a process of self-care that they can
awareness.
use. And awareness.
Around
the triggers and around maybe some movement repatterning you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the magic combination of ingredients that can help prevent that injury and help keep that youth athlete going for a long time and enjoying it more, frankly, than they would have before.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, injury prevention is performance enhancement.
Yeah.
If you can stay on the field for longer than everybody else, you are ultimately performing more than they are.
Love that.
Also a T-shirt. Another T-shirt quote right there. That was great.
That was awesome.
That was so awesome. Well, I think this is a hot topic for us, something we're obviously very passionate about here. And if you're listening and you have, you're in this role and this makes sense and it resonates and it connects, sometimes it just starts even with movement assessments. I think, well, where's a good place to start if you have a youth athlete? Well, if they have an issue, then bring them in to get that issue. Like if they have a pain or a complaint, right? Because that's what we're talking about. Don't ignore it.
Yeah.
2, look to see if you can diversify their sport of choice. That's another big recommendation we'd make. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then 3rd, we can always do movement patterning, and we can take a look at movement assessments to understand if a person has some performance deficiencies or some gaps, and that's something that is sometimes a good place to start. So if you have a youth athlete who has been specialized for a while, we can always do a movement assessment to see what's working, what's not working, and get ahead of it entirely before it shows up as a chronic issue or a pain point.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely agree.
All right. Well, keep those kids out there. Keep them active. Keep them safe. Keep them healthy. And keep head to toe in mind if you need some help. We'll see you in the next show. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, bye.
Thank you.